subchapter B. That'll tell you what this is about and that we have that option. So anyhow, if you will, let John explain as much as we can, and then everybody will be asked to come up, tell us who you are, and ask as many questions as you want. We'll try to be here till a reasonable hour anyway. So thank y'all for coming.
Can y'all hear me? Yes. Is that good? First off, I want to say thank you for coming, because this is as new to y'all as it is to us. Okay, this was all, we kind of knew we had the ETJ. We didn't know exactly what we could do and couldn't do, for the most part. And so after research, the county also helped us. Thank you, Sheree, for sending some of these things. And what we found out was House Bill 1445 was introduced back in the 80s, and that gave the cities an ETJ, okay, which was a half a mile just according by the size of the city, okay. So they entered into this contract, and all it decides is who governs the platting in that area. That's it. So just whatever platting is around the half acre or the half mile between the city limits and the half mile out, okay? So this was done between the county and the city back in 2002. Just to kind of give you some background, it was the contract was signed July 8, 2002, okay? And the county commissioner court in the meetings in March 25th of 2002, there was 4 options for this House Bill 1445. So option 1, and I was just going to kind of read this so y'all kind of understand. That's better. The county, option 1, because we have to, only one person can regulate the platting or the subdivision outside the city limits. Either the county does or the city does. So they elected for the city to do that. So here's the 4 options. The first option was city regulation. The county ends authority, and the city reviews all plats under city standards. Option 2, the city ends authority, and the county reviews all plats under county standards. Option 3, divided regulation. The city and county divide the ETJ geographically, each keeping authority only in one portion. Or joint regulation. The city and county jointly review plats under their authority, but provide one office to file plats, one filing fee, and provide one uniform and consistent set of plat regulations. So the county chose option 1 for the city to regulate that area, okay, on this day. So what that means, after talking to our lawyers and figuring out what we needed to do, okay, and this is, I guess, where the misconception is. Because we govern the half a mile out, all we can do now, as we can do now, without adding the subchapter that we're trying to see, is what we're in charge of now is anything half a mile out, we just look at your plats. Doesn't matter how you divide it, what you divide it, or how you divide it. We can't, you just bring the plats in. It's basically so that we can see them, to make sure that you don't landlock people and they have easements, okay? And then all we do is put our signature on it, and then we take it to the county and they file it, and that's what it is. So we're the only ones that see those plats, and the county and you. That's what we can do now, okay? I didn't know we could even do that, okay? But that's all that is. So in other words, what we have authority to do now that was given to us back in 2002 was just anytime you're subdividing any part of land, you're supposed to bring the plats into us. We look at them, and we don't have any jurisdiction on any ordinance or nothing, okay? All you do is just bring the plats in, and we authorize them, and then we take them to the courthouse and they get filed. And the way this is set up is we charge the little bit of money it takes us to review it. I think it's $50, if I'm not mistaken. And then the county, to file it in the county, is $191 or something like that. I can't really remember that number. But that's all it is just a filing on whatever you want to do with the land, okay? Subchapter B basically is the same thing, except Subchapter B, what we were looking at is You can divide your land any way you want to, just like you're doing now. But if somebody comes in and wants to put anything in, put a 30 lot subdivision, okay? So you bring that plat into us, and we make sure all of the roads are there, you know, to make sure that they attach to what the outside city limits are. So like, Mr. Johnson, you mind if I use you as an example? So Mr. Johnson has that property on Johnson Road. And if you know, Rank comes in, Gooch and them. Well, we also have side streets that come into it, like White Street, and then you have Cedar Street, and then you have another street that stop at the end of the deal. What subchapter B allows us to do is to make sure that they connect to the city streets. If it ever was to annex, now I'm not saying it's going to annex or anything else, that's a totally different story. We just make sure they connect to those streets if you're going to subdivide that land. And the only thing we can do is, when that happens, is our subdivision ordinance. This gives authority to look at our subdivision ordinance, the one we have in the city, okay? And you have to build a road like this. That's it, okay? And that's just, if it ever comes to be annexed later, it already matches the city, okay? There's a few provisions in there, and say if you do a subdivision and you want to get city water, okay, then you have to build the roads. Obviously, that's what we're looking at, but that gives us the right for you to build, to extend the water out there. And you have to build it to our specs. In the ETJ, we can't, there's no ordinances that you can keep. I mean, we can't give you a permit, we can't give you a zoning, we can't do anything. All we do is look at plats, okay? As far as I know, that's pretty much it. The only thing we can regulate, and right now, if you're not doing a subdivision, you can subdivide it whichever way you want to, and all we do is look at the plats and make sure that the people that you're selling it to, or however you're gonna sell it to, have rights on the roads. And you can keep the roads whatever. Dirt, caliche, it doesn't matter, okay? So there was a lot of misconception on what we could do and what we couldn't do. The only time is when we do subchapter B, there's a certain way that you have to bring in your plats. If we do subchapter B, then we're able to see what people are going to build on that property. That's what it's for. Okay, so say, you mind if I use you as an example? Say Cindy is going to subdivide her property, however much it is, and give it to her kids, and her kids are going to build houses on it, right? Just like normal. We can't govern it, we can't give you a permit for it, we can't do anything. But what you have to do is bring that plat in, and you have to put the house on it so we know what you're building. That's it, on that plat. It's a little different than just a plat. So we're able to see whatever type of building you're going to put in there. And what we look at is to make sure that if Cindy makes those lots, and I'm just using that example, if they're a 1 acre lot, then you're able to put a septic system out there. Or if it's smaller than 1 acre lot, then you have to use city sewer, and then we have to figure out how to get you city sewer. And that's not my regulation, that's the state's. Okay, that's just how that works. So, but subchapter B allows us the opportunity to look at what people are going to put on there. Nothing else. We can't give you a building permit. We can't give you really anything.
We don't regulate the building.
We don't regulate any ordinances in the ETJ. The only thing you have to do is when you put your plats in, is we have to look at them and make sure that they're correct with our ordinance that we have now, just in case Cindy wants to annex it and it's her decision. If she wants to annex in, then it fits in the city scheme. Guys, am I pretty close?
Yes.
Spot on.
And really, that's what it is. Because obviously people, if you want to know what's going on in ETJ and somebody's going to put in what did somebody say last time? A pig farm. So we'll know what it is, okay? We can't stop him from doing it, but you can do whatever with your land. We're not prohibiting anything you do with it. It's just if it's going to be a subdivision, like a big section of land that's going to have a lot of houses on it, then it's got to meet the city standards just because it's gonna attach to it at some time, or if they want our utilities. The good thing about Mason is we're a co-op and we can't give you all of the utilities. So we have also through the city and through the ETJ and stuff, we have a PUC line, which is called the Public Utility Council Utility Line. And so Central Texas and the city kind of govern who gives what power, okay? So there's a line, imaginary line on a map that says you can either take city power or you can take Central Texas power, okay? And you have 200 feet from where that line is. And what we have to do is, say Mr. Toon over there wants Central Texas power and he's within that little section of land, then he asks the city and the Central Texas if he can get power from Central Texas. Since he's in there, I let him have the power. I don't let him, but he can have that power. He has that option. It's kind of like with Cindy, what's the name, over there to McMillan's. So that PUC line goes right where our well is. So they have the opportunity to get city power or PUC or our power. They chose to take his power, and that's how they did that thing. So in between there, we can't attach all of our utilities to anything that's out there. It just depends on where we are. But if you attach the city water and the commission allows city water, then you have to build that water line according to the city. That's what this allows us to do. Does anybody have questions?
Let me add a couple of things first. There's a lot of misunderstandings, I think, about annexation. And for an example, we'll take Gary again, if you don't mind, Mr. Johnson. Gary can subdivide that property out there and do whatever he wants with that property. We cannot annex anybody's property. He can petition to be annexed, and then the city would review it and see if we felt like it was beneficial. If it was set up in a manner that the sanitation was a problem, there were many problems.
On the table.
Oh, okay, we changed. Sorry. If somebody had sanitation problems, all sorts of infrastructure problems.
It's on, he needs to get closer. It's on.
Okay. If let's say a property came up and it had sanitation running out on the ground, all sorts of problems, the city does not have to annex that unless we want to, or unless it gets into the condition in which it makes sense for it to be in the city. So we can't annex anything by force, okay? The other situation is if it's 5 acres or larger tracts, then it falls outside our scope, except a couple of conditions. One would be if they want to have public improvements, like a city road, or if anything was dedicated, city park or anything like that. If it's bigger than 5 acres, it falls outside our scope. Is that correct, John?
That's correct.
So, but for an example, like Gary over there on Johnson Road, he divided 4 lots, or acreages, or ranchettes, or whatever you want to call them, and they all were on the frontage of Johnson Road, so they didn't need a public street, would never need a public street. He's satisfying the water and the sewer requirements. Then he just brings in a plat, we look at it, building official looks at it, Chad will look at it, and approve it, and it's done. There's no regulations. There's no building permits, there's no building inspections, nothing. He has to follow state law as far as sanitation, as far as water. So that was just a couple of things that's been asked a lot. But yes, if you have any questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Do you mind stepping up to the mic for everybody to hear you as well? Did you want, yes, sir.
Sure.
That way everybody can hear the questions.
Yeah, I've got several questions. One directed to John. You just asked any questions about the sewer hookups and so forth. If you have somebody that's in the last meeting we were at, you talked about that. If somebody in the ETJ wants to be hooked up on city water, city sewer, then they get the permit, they're charged for the hookup and stuff. But what if they are, say, down a street that is not already has sewer out there? Does the city bring it out to them at no charge, or they have to bring it from wherever it is out to their property?
What's gonna happen is if there's no water out there, so there's water up close to the edge, I guess. And we have had citizens that have sewer outside the city limits already. So they have to pay from wherever our city limits hits. From there, all the way to your house, you have to build it, okay? So you'll be in charge of that. You'll be in charge of that amount of money to get it to us.
Okay.
But there's lots of ways to do that too. Some of them out there have a grinder pump, which you don't have to dig the whole infrastructure type deal, okay? Where you can put grinder pump out there on your deal, and then it doesn't have to be as deep, and you can run it to our sewer line. Just as long as our sewer lines are able to hold it. Obviously, we're interested in this just because, I don't know how to say this. I don't want our culture to change. That's just my opinion. I want Mason to be Mason. And I'll do everything I can to keep the culture Mason, even with the new people that come in, and we accept them with open arms, because there's nothing we can do, because money's gonna come, right? But if we have some sort of maneuverability where we can more or less handle some of these things, would be the best for me as a citizen of Mason and for the city. And so we can't do anything what happens in ETJ, but if we can have some sort of influence on how to make it look better and to keep Mason is my deepest concern. And I've grown up here my entire life. My families have been here forever. And so my deepest desire is to keep the culture in Mason, right? So if we're just looking at plats, I want us to be able to see what they're gonna build out there, because they're gonna be our neighbor, right? They're gonna be your neighbor. And if they build it right, and then in the future, I don't know when, I may not even be here when they annex stuff in, but that way, when the city grows, it's automatically attached to what we have, and we can make it work.
Yeah, and I just have one thing to add. The reason we want to look at it is, we need to make sure that our infrastructure, the infrastructure we have in place, can handle
Correct.
what's going to be attached to us. So that's very key, very important.
And that's why we can't regulate anything out there except roads, and if you're attached to our utility. Then we can see, okay, do we need to buy another well? Does the city need to invest later as a project? Do we need to add more tanks for water? Do we need to, our sewer ponds? The good thing is that the city, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit, just for your information. When I got here 12 years ago, 13 years ago, we started working on infrastructure for the city. Right off the bat, I knew we had issues, right? So right off the bat, I started the loop around town, as y'all remember, right? And basically, water loop all the way around town. And basically, what that added to the city was basically another storage tank in the ground that we didn't have to put up on a hill. It added another 10-inch water main all the way around the city, so we'll have enough water for fire suppression, which was one of the things that we needed really bad in the city. And it allowed us to give a different pressure plane that we could make sure that people on the outskirts of town, where there may be some dead ends, have some more water, right? And that also allowed us another 350,000 gallon tank of extra water in the ground. So we started that project. The other thing that I noticed was our sewer pond was very, very old, and Mr. Whitehead and them gave us that property. And of course, the county, we had to do a lot of work, and we ended up making a brand new sewer system. I think it's now 7 years old. It's hard to believe, but it's 7 years old. But when we built that sewer system, the actual plant, I made it big enough to handle 3 times the size of Mason, because I didn't know what was going to happen in the future. I was hoping it wouldn't ever get there, but we're able to handle that, okay? As soon as that little project started, we started, as you all know, the landfill project, right? And I knew that 7 years ago, and it took us a long time to get here because I knew we were going to run out of water. I'd run out of land, right? So we've got a landfill, okay? We started on the outside big picture that we saw that was coming for Mason for the next 20 years. Actually, with the landfill, is 335 years. Okay, I won't be around when that thing gets filled up. So, but now what we gotta look at, and this is why this is so important, is now that we've got things that can handle that, now we look at all the little artery veins inside the city, okay? So now, are all my 6-inch water lines capable of taking something outside the city limits, right? Do I have enough wells to even do it, okay? So those are the things that we look at. Do I have enough, I have enough sewer lines, and the sewer lines are, most of them are 6-inch and 8-inch and some 10-inch. And as you all know, was built in the 50s, okay? We've replaced lots of things and done a lot of different things. But we know where the areas are that if we know what's going on outside, we can adjust to it, and we can start working on projects on making those sewer lines a little bigger, as we know where maybe a subdivision may go. I'm not saying make one. I'm just saying where something may go, and we can start working on that so Mason won't run into issues later. Okay? It's a great benefit for the citizens of Mason, and it's a great benefit for the county, because we both know, and I work really well with the county, okay? Judge Bearden, love him to death. He was my ag teacher. He was my teacher for years. His wife was my teacher. He spanked me a couple times. I learned. Look, I'm here. So, you know, we're in this community to be in this community. We don't want to give you any more regulations than you have. That's not what we want. That's not what I want. Because if you make a law, it's hard to take back, right? But the only thing that this is governing is right now, we were supposed to be looking at every plat, but I know we haven't because wasn't paying attention to it. I didn't even know until we started doing all this. So, and it's just plats. All we look at is how you're going to subdivide it. We sign off on it, and it goes. The next one, the subchapter B, just allows us to see what people are going to actually build out there. Okay? So, along with the plats, we get to see what building is on it. Okay, or what building you think you're going to put on it. But we still can't regulate anything. It's just, it gives us that authority to see what's on there, or what you're going to build.
Did he answer your question?
Well, that one he did.
Okay.
And I do want to apologize, I did introduce myself to you. I'm Dennis Bryan. We have family property that is north of East Pontotoc Street in the ETJ zone, but outside the city limits.
I don't think that one works. Here.
Oh, okay. I'll try to speak up. I can speak up.
Okay.
Yeah. One question I do have is that we have, our property is a lot more than 1 acre. We did not get the letter, as long as a lot of other people around apparently didn't either. And I want to ask you what the process was in that, but I know that may be rhetorical, but you realize now that something messed up and not getting letters out to the right people.
Yes, sir.
Who are involved.
And it's totally my fault.
Well,
Because what we did is we tried to use the Basin Appraisal District map. We tried to identify every landowner that was over an acre that would be likely to subdivide and send letters out. And I've answered numerous phone calls, as well as our staff, because of my mistake that I didn't get letters out to everyone. We made a very honest effort, but apparently we fell short. And we're having this meeting not because we have to, it's because we want to try to share. And I've spoke to at least a half a dozen people today, apologized, and said, you have my cell phone number, you call me if you have a question, I'll meet with you face to face, whatever. We're just trying to make sure the community knows what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it.
okay, good. It also might be consideration to have these maybe more in the evening, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A lot of people do the jobs and other things, could not be here today.
Absolutely.
So-
There'll be a public hearing on July I think the 18th is our meeting in our regular commissioners meeting in July. We're not going to have it this month because we have too many things on the agenda, and there will be an opportunity for a public hearing then. And we'll try to have those meetings as much as we can at 5:30, where people that are working can make those meetings.
Okay. John, you did a good job of answering some of my questions and the way you explained things. I appreciate that. One question I do have is on annexation that you mentioned about. If, say, a John Doe is out in the ETJ zone, and the property owner around him, maybe on a couple of sides, does a subdivision, His property is between the existing city limit sign and where this is gonna be. And he wants to be annexed, and you decide to annex that subdivision. Is John Doe brought into that because of his location, or can he say, I don't want to be in the city limits and stay out of it, or how is that going to be set up?
The limited knowledge that I have, we cannot force anybody. If there's a group that wants to annex, and there's one person holding that up and he's in between, then I don't think it's possible.
We cannot, if you don't want to be annexed, we cannot annex you. That's a new law that changed
Yes.
not too long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at our city limits, it's kind of, we even have holes in the middle of it. so-
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the sentences in this proposal states that proposals in the best interest of promoting health, safety, morals, and general welfare. What's meant by the morals part of that?
That most of that language came directly out of the state code, and I think the general consensus is that we want to have organized subdivisions. We're not here to promote subdivisions. I don't think anybody probably in this room really wants us to grow, but it's likely, as we see around us, that we are going to have growth, and we just want to stay in front of it. We want to make sure our infrastructure can take care of the people we have now before we allow anyone else to add more subdivisions. Until we're able to evaluate that, that's a priority for, I think, for John, Michael, and I, then we do not want to take on any more subdivisions until we are convinced that we can handle it properly. And I've been actively, and John has been actively out here looking for water wells to see how we can supplement our water system. Do we need to increase our storage? We're trying to evaluate that. That won't happen overnight,
Yeah.
but we're starting the process.
Sure. Okay. I think that covers all mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a question.
Yes, sir.
My name's Mike Dale, I'm a real estate broker here. I don't need a mic. Explain to your crowd here the interface, seeing of the county's subdivision restrictions, which are being amended as we speak, and how that interfaces with land that's in the county but in the ETJ.
Okay. The county in 2002 gave us the right to regulate the ETJ. So if you have, let's say for an example, you have some property inside this ETJ that's in the county, and then some that's not inside the ETJ, what's out in the county will regulate. And they're working on subdivisions now. And they've been working for months, I understand. So we only regulate those that are in the ETJ. So you can't have regulation for two different entities. And that's the reason the government told us to make a choice. And that choice was made before any of us was here, on this table anyway, back in '02. And the county opted to give it to the city, and the city opted to take it. And so that's where we're at this point. Yes, sir.
I'll try to answer that a little better. I think if say, Mr. Dale, if you have property that's half of it's in the ETJ and half of it's outside the city limits, we're gonna have to work with the county. Again, that's where we work with the county on, okay, how do we do this and how do we regulate the platting or whatever that they do? Is that kind of what you were wanting to ask? How they interface together?
Yeah, well, I just wanted
Yeah.
public to understand.
I don't know that answer, but I'm sure that the county and I and us will be able to work that out. I don't know if, because in government law, you can't have two people govern that same place. Does that make sense? So I'm sure that their regulations are gonna have to try to, and ours are gonna have to try to figure out how they interface together, and I don't know exactly how that's gonna look. I know that the county commission and the judge and them have been giving me a bunch of stuff on what their regulations or what they're looking at, and I've kind of seen those. Judge Bearden has given me some of those, and I'm just trying to look through them again. I'm talking, it's a bunch. It's a lot of stuff to read and try to figure out how we do that. So I don't really know that answer, Mr. Dale, but I know that whatever's in ETJ, we'll have to get from right now, whatever the plat is, we'll have to look at that same plat. So I'm guessing when the county or whoever, the person subdivides that section, the county looks at that plat and the city looks at the plat on just what their section is that's attached to it. So in other words, if he has 10 houses on one side and 10 houses on the other side, and those other 10 houses are in the half mile, we look at the same plat that the county does and we approve it.
Another question? Yes, Cindy?
Is there anything in this that has to do with acquisition of water? Or is there anything in Part B that has anything to do with water on land or anything like that?
Not that I could see.
Not that I know of.
Okay, and the other question, so you said that it would help Mason look better. Do you want to make Mason look better?
Well, I think one of the things is the city of Mason, just to make sure that whatever happens in the half a mile outside the city limits attaches to all of our outside streets, so it looks uniform.
Okay.
And again, we can't do zoning, we can't do anything either. I mean, so that's all really this is.
There's been problems already created with the streets is because a street may dead end or a street may have a dog leg in it, and we're trying to keep those things from happening for safety reasons. And so it looks better. If it's organized, I guess, would be a better way of looking at that. And by the way, we will be working on better audio and video for this room and speakers for people can hear a lot better. And we apologize. We're working on that too. It'll take us a month or two, but Casey and I will be working on that to try to improve that. That way y'all can hear, or if you're remote and you're looking at our streaming, you'll be able to see who's speaking as well as hear them.
That's good. Another question, how many pages is this document that the attorney has recommended that y'all take up for your resolution?
4 or 5 pages of the ordinance.
4 pages.
Total, 4 pages. All right, that's heartening.
It's 4 pages on exactly what you need to do for the plating. But if you're doing a subdivision, it includes what our subdivision is in the city, which is about that big on how to build the roads and whatever stuff.
But it has no specs for any kind of buildings or
No.
inspections or
I mean,
anything like
we
that.
can't do any of that.
And as far as like you said, you have to show on the map what your building is going to be?
If you don't have any buildings to put on there, you just show me a plan.
But if you do, can you just draw it, or do you have to go to somebody and get
It
it?
has to. Let me read this to you.
Okay.
Okay. Required information for the development plat. Okay, this is the subchapter plat. All applicants shall be submitted with the required information as stated in the application form. Information required shall be the same as required in the final platting. So like in the city, if there's any surveyors in here, you have to have, exactly where your property lines are, okay? And that's one thing that we don't look at outside an ETJ. In the city, you have to have setback rules. Okay, so like you can't build a house within 25 feet of the roadway. You have to be 5 feet away from your neighbor's fence on the side, and you have to be 6 feet away from your neighbor on the back end. Okay, out in ETJ, we can't enforce that. Okay, but in the final plat with this one, it says be prepared. It has to be prepared by a professional land surveyor. So if you're going to do any plat that you do, like when you're going to the title company, so I just bought land in the county. I had to get a plat to tell me what that was, and that's all we're looking for.
What it cost you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure whoever's if you're gonna sell or buy, whatever, most things have a plat. I don't know, I think you could still do it on meets and bounds, but most of them require some sort of surveyor on there. Clearly show the boundary lines, the development plat. Clearly show each existing proposed building. And again, this more or less falls on if you're gonna do a subdivision, okay? Clearly show each existing and proposed building, structure or improvement or proposed modification of the configuration of the building. Structure or improvement involving the change of a building or a structure or whatever is gonna go on there. Clearly show the easement or right of way. Okay, so this is where I was talking about where if you are facing Johnson Road, okay, so say you're facing, that first lot is Johnson Road, but behind it is 2 more. Like Mr. Johnson did, he made a road, and it clearly has to show that road on that map, okay? Clearly show the dimensions of each of each street or whatever road it is, so you have to show all the dimensions. And this is for a subdivision, so you have to show the sidewalks, the alley, if you're gonna build a park in that section, if you're gonna do whatever, okay? Be accompanied by, require the copies of the plat. So the very last thing is, when we go and file it with the county, I have to give them two little small plats, and then I have to give them 2 of the big plats. And then our affidavit saying, to the best of my knowledge, this plat is correct. And we take it to the county and they file and they put it in the county plat book. And that's it.
If you're gonna sell the property, I'm not a realtor, Bruce or Mark or somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're gonna sell the property, you're already gonna have to have it surveyed for the owner you're selling it to will know what they bought. And that way they can get a deed to that property or mortgage on the property or anything else. It's not really anything really additional than what would be needed if you're subdividing to sell property anyway.
So what changes between what you have now in place since 2002 and what is being proposed?
There's only about 3 things. If you have to have a public road, in other words, if there's not access from a public street already, then you have to meet city requirements for those, and we hope to get those to line up. Okay, the only other thing is if you want public utilities from the city, then you have to meet those regulations. We will come up to the property, but then your lines, your infrastructure inside the development has to meet our regulations. That way we protect our folks that's already in the city, that they have water pressure too, and we're not losing our water pressure. That's the reason we have a loop, or we ask for a loop. We would ask for fire suppression and things like that, if you want our utilities. If you don't, then you have no restriction. Is there anything else, John, that's just a big item? You can read this government code and you see there's more don'ts than do's. And there's a lot of wording in it that says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. But there's only those 2 things that we've really identified, and that's on the property owner. As far as if you don't need that, then we don't regulate it.
Yes, sir.
John, if there are no regulations for what's built in these subdivisions, then is somebody okay coming in, make a subdivision, 40 lots of a mobile home park, and build a storage unit along there with it?
Probably where they're gonna run into problems.
Whatsoever to go by?
Yeah, they may run into problems with state
That's
standards.
in the best interest of the county or the city?